Welcome to the Ordinary Guy Garage. I'm Scott, Ordinary Guy, and today we're going to talk about camshafts. All right, well, I have my engine in the machine shop getting some work done. My last video showed some of the carnage that happened down at the track, I suppose. And so it's in the machine shop. I'm making some upgrades and some changes to the engine, and I figure that this would be a perfect opportunity to go over some of the parts that I got coming in for it and what I'm choosing for it and why. So first off, this was the piston that I broke. See a little chunk out of it missing. Everything else was pretty good except for the crack in the block. So I'm still kind of up in the air what happened, but you know, it is what it is. Hyperutectic piston is what this is. It's just basically a cast piston. And some guys have a lot of luck, some guys don't, and I'm not blaming it on that. I'm just saying that that's what this is and that's what happened. So I'm upgrading it with a different set of pistons. I'm gonna put a set of forged pop-up pistons in there, or dome pistons. So I'll go from about 10.3 to just under 13:1 compression ratio. So I'll be bumping up to race fuel. So with that in mind, I could change a few other things too. So the camshaft that I did have in here was a Comp Cam's XE284H hydraulic flat tappet cam with a 240, 246 duration at 50 and a 507, 510 lift. So really good street cam, and in my opinion, it's actually on the other end of the spectrum of street cam. You're not, I personally wouldn't want to go much bigger than that on the street, because why? So if you don't have a race car, then maybe you do want something more like that, but I can get all my thrills out of the race car, so I don't need to anything too crazy on the street. So that's what that was. Now, what I chose was solid lifter flat tappet cam for now. This stuff is expensive. So these engines are expensive. So I'm putting together a solid short block right now on this step. And my next step for the engine, maybe next year, is gonna be a different set of heads and probably a solid roller cam. So can't do it all at once. Money's not that available to me as far as stuff like this goes. So anyways, that being said, solid lifter cam, and this is actually a Summit brand cam. Now Summit doesn't actually make these camshafts. They're sold to Summit from other manufacturers in generic boxes, and Summit stamps them as their own cams. Not a problem with it. There's some pretty good cams. I bought one for my El Camino, my 68 396, and it was actually a Summit branded cam, but it was an Elgin cam, and a good quality cam. No problems with it so far. I haven't driven the car very much, but no problems with it. So this one here, I'm not quite sure who makes this. I heard that Crane Cam makes these. I looked on the internet and I couldn't find a listing for Crane that had the same specs as this. But I did find a listing for, what is this? An Urson cam. This is the cam card for it. You can't really see it in here because of the reflection. But the specs are just dead on, pretty much the same as this. So this could be an Urson cam. I don't know. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying it could be. So, but anyways, the cam itself, it comes with installation procedure, which will go over some of the things like break-in and all that, which is really important. It comes with a cam card that's got the specs for the cam. This cam is a 555, let's see, it's a 537 intake lift and a 555 exhaust lift. And then we have 256 intake and 264 exhaust duration at 50. So, and 106 degree lobe separation. So that's gonna be in between the intake and the exhaust lobes. That's how far they're spaced. So 106 degrees is pretty stout. You don't really, that's more of a, and what, okay, so I'll explain the lobe separation angle. 106 degrees is pretty tight. But what that does is it gives you a little bit more time where your intake valve and your exhaust valve are open a little bit at the same time. And what that does is it improves scavenging. So what happens is, as it's pulling out the exhaust out of the cylinder on that stroke, it's also just starting to take in some of the intake. So what that'll do is it'll help, that pushing in will also help pull out some more of that exhaust, and that pulling will also help pushing in some of the intake charge. So what that does is it gives you a really good mid-range torque to high end, not so good on the bottom end, and it's really hard to run anything vacuum. You have any vacuum accessories. So if you have like power brakes, forget it. You have to run a separate vacuum pump, or you have to run a vacuum canister or something like that. So if you got vacuum things, you don't want a tight lobe separation on this. Now, what I did for the lift, and the reason that I chose this, and I've been studying cams for a while, and I'm by no means an expert. You know, I still guessing on a lot of this stuff. But what I've been learning about it and all that, I chose this cam, and then I talked to the machinist, and the machinist agreed. He said, you know what, that's a good choice, which made me really feel good about it, because, like I said, I'm just learning as I go. Been doing that for years. So now a flat tappet cam, they tend to go flat with a lot of spring pressure. So when you've got a cam with a lot of lift, it takes a heavy spring to control the valve. This has a 555 is the highest point of lift. And what we did was, or what I chose was not something with a crazy, because I could have gone up to a 580 lift or even a little bit more, but the spring pressure is real heavy. And so what I did was ran a little bit larger duration and not quite that big of a lift, hoping it'll all balance out and it's going to put me all right where I need to be. Again, the long duration on this, the 264 and 256, not so good for street driving, because it puts you up in the higher RPM range, but really good for drag racing. I have a 4,000 RPM stall converter in here, so I'm not really interested in anything down at 3,000 RPM or so. I leave the line at about 2,000, so I mean it's going to work good. Now I have solid lifters for this cam. Now it's a hydraulic lifter, has a little spring in here and a cup, and it's run off of. So when you're at a lower RPM, you'll have a lower oil pressure, and it doesn't quite pump it up. It'll pump it up to different degrees to a certain extent. It doesn't change it that much, but it does a little bit. But what it does is when you're at higher RPMs, they tend to float. These here, not so much. This is solid. There's I don't know if you can hear it. There's a little tiny, not really a plunger, but a little piece in there, and then it fills with oil, and it's solid. So. But the drawback to these is you have to adjust the lash. It's not just put them in and turn it and then call it good as far as, on the rocker arm. It's, you have to set it. This is going to be set at 26 thousandths on the intake and the exhaust. That's what the cam manufacturer is recommending, so that's what I'll be doing on that. So the old cam, not so big, and it had a wider lobe separation, which is good for the street, not all that good for drag racing. So this here is a drag racing cam. Actually, it's a circle track cam, but circle track cams work really good in drag racing, so that's what I'm going with. The other thing is, this thing, cam and lifters, was 150 bucks. So that would have been, I'd have spent at least 300 on another one. This is only going to be in there not even for a year, and then I'm going to swap it out for a solid roller. So that being said, that's why I did that. So the other thing is, I'll go over it real quickly here, break-in lube. This thing came with the instructions, came with the cam card, came with some lube that you put on the cam for when you put it in, so that way when you break it in, you don't wipe out a lobe. This is not enough. This is not enough. What it is it's moly graphite lube right there. So I bought a tub of it, a while back, a couple years back, and I'll just throw this on the shelf, and I'll just use all the moly graph lube. And when I put it in, of course, you don't have to cake the journals, this part here, but the lobes you got to put a good amount on when you put it in. And then I also put a little bit on my finger, rub it off on the lifter, stuff the lifter down in the hole. And that way, I'm pretty sure when it starts up, it's going to have a lot of lube on it. The other thing that you want to do with one of these cams is, you know, here's your valve spring, and when you get into a cam like this, you're gonna have dual valve springs. So even in this other one here, the comp cam is a dual valve spring kind of setup. You wanna run with it. So there's an inner spring. So what you wanna do is you get that inner spring out of there, take it out of your cylinder head and run just the outside spring until you break it in, and that'll take off a lot of the pressure. Run that, start it up, run it for 20 minutes, 25 minutes, 2,000, 2,500 RPM. Make sure you keep it cool. Don't bring it down to an idle, and just run it, and that'll break in the cam. What'll happen is the lifters will rotate. The lifters will rotate on the lobe. These lobes are at a slight angle, which causes the lifter to rotate, and that'll break in a wear pattern. That's what you want to do. So, and then after that, then you pull it apart, put that inner spring back in, Bob's your uncle, ready to roll. So really quickly, and then I'll wrap all this up, I will show you, this cam here was only driven at the drag strip, no street use, so it was ran on pretty hard. Now you can see on the lobes, a properly broken in cam, you can see the little bit of coloration where the cam, or the lifter rode, and if you look down at all the lobes, they're all in perfect shape. So this cam can be reused again, no problem. And I use that break-in method that I just gave you right there. Lots of moly lube, and not engine assembly lube, moly lube on there, and a proper break-in on it. That cam's good to go. I saved the lifters in order of how they came out. The cam goes back in the box it came out of, going into my storage, and it'll probably go on to something else. So anyways, that's it for that. Thanks for subscribing. Thanks for listening to me ramble on. Hopefully it was a bit educational and somewhat entertaining. I don't know. I got other parts coming up. I bought an oil pan. I'll go through that and a few different things. So anyways, thanks a lot for hanging out. Thanks for listening. Thanks for subscribing. And whatever you do, my friends, stay safe.